Welcome to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode, I'm going to be talking with produced screenwriter and script analyst, script Dr. Eric. He's read hundreds of scripts over the course of his career, and he offers up some nuggets of writing advice. He's also read scripts for agents and gives us some tips on how to get your material read by them. As always, if you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving a review in iTunes. I really do want to improve this podcast, so some honest, constructive feedback is very much appreciated. If you're watching this episode on YouTube or another online channel, please like it and share it with your friends and comment on it. I want to give a shout out to a few people who did leave me nice reviews on iTunes. Thank you to RDM Cleode, Zanetta P, Ryan Kroll, JKLM, R123, Wingdiz, and Ginger Shine. They left me a nice review in iTunes, and I really do appreciate it. And over at YouTube, Todd Spradlin and Fiona Kernagagan left me some comments and some very kind words. So I really do appreciate those people just taking a moment to give me a comment. So again, if you find this podcast helpful, please do just leave a comment. I'm going to read all the comments, and it can really help shape the future of this podcast. So thanks again. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I will also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show instead of listen to it. You can find all the links and the show notes and the transcript at my blog, and that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and just look for episode 3. And as I said, all the links and the transcript and the show notes will all be there. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell Your Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address, and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents and managers and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. So just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide if you'd like to check that out. A couple quick notes on what I'm working on. As I mentioned last month, I was gearing up to send out a email and fax blast on my one location female protagonist thriller script. I ended up sending the blast out on September 9th, so it's now been 2 or 3 weeks. As I mentioned, I have a huge list of producers, probably around 5,000 people in my database. I've got dozens of script requests from the blast, and now I'm starting to field some of the responses from people who have read the script. So far, I have one producer who may be interested in producing it on a very, very low budget. So I've got to consider if this is something I really want to do. Overall, though, people seem very positive with the writing. After reading the script, I've had a bunch of people check out my website and request other scripts that I have listed. So that's a good sign. At least they like the writing enough to look at some of my other material. As I mentioned, too, I've written several thriller screenplays that are kind of similar in tone and scope to this script. So there's quite a few other scripts. There's 2 or 3 other scripts on my website that are actually quite similar. So I'm hoping to find, even if this specific script doesn't get optioned, it might lead to another option on one of these other scripts. One big takeaway from the blast is how important the concept is to getting script requests from cold query letters. In June of this year, which was just 3 months ago, I did a blast for a baseball comedy that I wrote, and compared to this recent blast, which is, as I said, a one-location thriller screenplay, I've gotten probably a third more responses from this script than from the baseball comedy. And a lot of the responses from the baseball comedy was, it doesn't play overseas. Baseball's not big overseas. So it just really goes to show how important the concept is in terms of how many script requests you're going to get. And I think this really is a good demonstration of that. Because I think a one-location thriller script is highly marketable. I think a baseball comedy script is much less marketable, and I think that basically bears out in the results I got from this blast. So keep that in mind as you're starting to work on your next script. What concepts are more marketable than others, because at the end of the day, the more script requests you can get from a blast, the better chances you have of actually optioning that script. And just further, the query letters that I sent out were basically the same. my credits have not changed much since June. They haven't changed at all since June. So the only thing that was different in the query letter, I'm going to basically list my credits and then I pitch the specific log line. So the only real difference in the query letters is the actual the log line, the actual pitch for the script, because the rest of the query letter is basically the same, which is just basically me listing my credentials, and that hasn't changed. So really keep this in mind as you start to come up with new ideas. Think about your concept and think about if you really think it's a marketable concept. So now let's get into the main segment, which is an interview with Script Dr. Eric. A couple of quick notes about this interview. I'm still kind of new with podcasting and interviewing, and I actually recorded it via Skype. We were both on Skype, and I actually had a video portion where I was trying to record the video as well as the audio, but for whatever reason, I made a mistake and only was able to record the audio. So I apologize for that. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's not really that much to see, but if you're just watching on iTunes, it's not going to make a difference. But hopefully in the future, my interviews will have a video portion to them. Anyways, here's the interview. I hope you enjoy it and get something out of it. Okay, welcome, Eric, to the October episode of Selling Your Screenplay podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ashley. Appreciate it.
So, yeah, I thought to start we would just try and get a little bit of a overview of your background, how you got into screenwriting, being a script consultant, and just your experience in the industry.
Yeah, no problem. The question was how I got started in screenwriting, or how I got the first one.
Yeah. Let's just start. Take a step all the way back. I mean, how did you first get into the business? What was your first job in the business? And how did you that led up to actually selling a script? And how did you decide to become a script consultant?
Yeah, I mean, well, I first got into, when I first graduated from UCLA many years ago, I first got into the industry I interned at a talent agency before I graduated, and then when I graduated, they hired me on, and I worked there for about a year. I made a lot of nice contacts. One of the contacts, a few of the contacts were literary agents. So while I was there, I was mostly receptionist, and then I was an assistant for a talent agent. But I was still reading scripts because I had been writing scripts even before that. I knew I wanted to do screenwriting, and so I was working all these other jobs, but I would go to the literary agents and I would ask them, hey, do you need anything read? Do you need anything read? And just read stuff for free, over and over again, and just give them my opinion, because they all have stacks, stacks of scripts, just, this high. They have their pile that they have to read or they have to get, a really, really trusted opinion, and then they have like their huge, huge stacks. So they're always looking for people to read, especially for free. So they were happy to have my help. And
where do these scripts where do these scripts come from? Like you mentioned, they have a stack that they have to read and a stack that maybe they'll eventually get to. Where do most of those scripts come from? How do you get in the stack of scripts that they have to read?
Well, I mean, in my experience, and maybe you have a different experience with agents or producers, there's always things that are pressing for them. Like they have a few scripts that they need to get back to. It's their client script, or it's someone real important that they're trying to work with, or whatever, and they have like, a deadline or someone they're responsible for. They also have scripts of, friends of friends who give them scripts that they're trying to read, and they'll eventually get back to that person. And then they also have just submitted scripts that maybe caught their eye through a query letter, or, a distant recommendation that, they have a little less obligation to read, but would like to read someday, or the person contacts them once a month and they probably should read it eventually. So my experience, like most, people who are out there trying to, if they're looking for new clients or anything like that, then they do have these huge, huge piles of things that they may never get to. So.
Yeah, sure. So continue with your story. So you're working as a talent agent and reading scripts.
Right, assistant, to a talent agency. Assistants do a lot of the work, so basically I was a talent agent. No, but so it's reading scripts, and then I decided, I am kind of losing my soul working for a talent agency, and so and I want to be a writer, and I write. I wrote other things too at the time besides just screenplays, just creative writing, and just, would read a lot. And so I quit the agency to just, write on the side and work odd jobs. But I knew I loved screenwriting. I knew I wanted to continue in that path. And so I So, a couple of the agents that worked there and then soon left that agency, because I had connections with them they still wanted me to read for them. And so I still would read for them just freelance. They would hire me on, their companies would hire me on, and I would read. Other people I knew there would want me to read, and so they would, throw me a script here and there. And so it was a little bit, the tough thing about being a reader, especially a reader when you're starting out at that level, is the work's very inconsistent. So you don't know when you're going to get a script. But when you do, when you're in your, early 20s, you read a script for $50 and you're like, wow, that's $50, and I read a script and I gave the feedback, that's amazing. I can't believe I'm getting paid $50 to read a script. But then you realize if you're trying to make that a full-time living, that, wow, this is going to be really, really hard. To make script reading, freelance reading a full-time living.
Sure. So at some point during all this, you wrote a script and were able to sell it. Maybe give us a little history about that. How did you meet the producers? How did you get that script into production?
Yeah, so basically I was living, the life of, working. I had part-time jobs and then writing, and I had a writing partner at the time. And we had some success just getting a few meetings here and there just from submitting query letters, which I'm sure we could talk about, and, through friends of friends and that sort of thing. And so these were producers that he met actually at a party. And we were, my writing partner and I were writing a script together, and he met these producers at a party who made low-budget movies. And he said, hey, we're writing a low-budget movie, and he told them about it, and they're like, well, that's okay. And he's like, well, we got other ideas. And they're like, great, we'd love to hear other ideas. And so he said, okay, my writing partner and I will get back to you next week. And so basically he came to me and he said, hey, you got any ideas for a low budget script? I said, I guess we got a week to come up with something. So we came up with, so basically I went through my old stack of like ideas for scripts, the notes you have of like, what will I write in the future? And I found a few that I'm like, okay, they're looking for single location, only a few actors. Okay, what can fit that mold? And I had like 3 or 4 ideas, and then I pitched it to my writing partner, and then we went back and forth on how to improve that pitch, and then we pitched it to those guys, and they really liked one of the ideas. They had liked, we sent them some samples for writing. They loved our samples, so they're like, yeah, we love this idea, and we want you to write it, so we're going to pay you to write the script.
Okay.
And then they turned it into a movie, yeah.
Nice. So, but they actually paid you before you had written the script?
No, they paid after.
Okay. So
we
you wrote
signed a contract and everything on delivery of X draft, and you get paid X amount, things like that.
Nice. So, and how do you think the movie turned out in general?
I mean, it's it's a good lesson. It's the first one, so I feel like it's a good lesson in what happens in low budget movies. There were. Just briefly, I thought that a surprise that the acting was really good, because when you're writing for a low budget company and they're like, oh, we're making this movie for $100,000, and we're not really paying these actors much, and so you're thinking like, oh God, while you're writing the script, like, what lines can I deliver that these actors won't mess up? So you want everything to be clear, but like not hokey, so beyond just trying to tell a good story, you're walking this fine line of like, okay, make it easy, make it easy for everyone, just get this clear thing. So that said, there were a lot of great things that were delivered. There were some key things that they left out, of the script that the director or whatever decided to leave out. We're like, the script was pretty bare bones. Those key elements, kind of were important. Beyond that, the other thing, though, I'd have to say that really took our movie from like a movie that you could be like, oh, that was not bad. It was a decent, low budget movie to like, this is a rough watch. Which honestly, I really feel like maybe I'm a little hard on it, because I envisioned it in my head as something a little better, but I don't really recommend it. I don't carry it around with me. Like, none of my friends have seen it. Lawrence, I think, our friend's the only one that's seen it. But I really consider it a rough watch. And the main reason, though, actually is sound. Their sound mix and their background music sometimes overpowers the scene, to the point where you're not sure if the actors are hearing the music like it's kind of mood music. It's like these moody strings and things, and you're like, do the actors hear that? Or because it's basically like three people trapped in a box and they don't know why, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So weird things are happening. So it's kind of key that the music and the sound effects are very clear. Huh. So to me, that that messes a lot of things up.
Huh. Okay.
It's
well,
like,
if anybody does want to check it out, is there any place? Is it available on Amazon or streaming or iTunes or anything like that?
It's available at my house on a DVD.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't know. You could probably, if you dug enough online, you could probably find it. I'm not issuing a challenge to say you'll never find it out there. If you're on the internet, you'll probably be able to find it. It was released in a small run, I think, in Europe. I've seen our IMDb reviews. It's all like from the UK. So I think it was out on video there.
What's the name of it?
It's called Shadowplay.
Shadowplay. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for it. So how did you move into I guess just starting your own script consultant business?
Yeah. So at one point I decided, okay, the screenwriting thing is actually it's okay, and we got the momentum started, but I wanted a better part-time job, so I decided to go to grad school. So to have like that sort of full-time, like part-time job that leads to something in the future. Mm-hmm. So I went to grad school, and then while I was in grad school, I met my current wife, who's in business, and she is I say current like as if I had past lives. I met the woman who would become my one and only wife in grad school, and she was in business. She wasn't in grad school with me, and we would talk about business things, and it got me started. Like I was still reading scripts part time for the agent that I mainly read for. And some other small things, and I was still going to grad school and still writing on my own. But I thought, you know what? Like at one point when I was reading for that agent, I was talking to one of his clients and giving the client notes, and the agent didn't pay me very much to read for him, right? And I was talking to the client, and the client was like, "Wow, Eric, like your notes, I paid a script consultant hundreds of dollars, and your notes are just as good as his, if not better, So I'm like, wait a second, like if this, I should be going directly to, screenwriters themselves and helping them out." Mm-hmm. And so that's where I got the idea. And then I started realizing, then I established the website back in, I think this is 2007, end of 2007, 2008, and then beginning of 2008. And then just started, reaching out to people, seeing who's out there if they need help on their scripts, just trying to get it started, trying to spread good word of mouth, get good feedback, and just helping people directly, since I had been doing this at that point for, maybe 8 years, so, mm-hmm. And with my own screenwriting experience, I think it offers, a slightly different take on it versus a lot of people who haven't, producers or agents who haven't done, or assistants who haven't written scripts themselves. So.
Sure. So in all of your years, how many scripts would you estimate you've actually read?
Yeah, I tried to calculate that one time. I was like, let's say I read, 50 scripts a year. Some scripts years I read 100 scripts. So I don't know, I just say like over 1,000 or 1,000 because I lost track along. Like, do you count, Ashley, the ones that you read halfway through?
Yeah, that's a half. Yeah. So what are some just common mistakes? I mean, there must be some similarities in problems that you see from new writers, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new writers listening to our podcast. So maybe you can give just a couple of quick tips to new writers, just common mistakes that you see over and over again, things that they can avoid.
Yeah, I mean, just the basic thing of just getting the structure down, which, I'm sure you've talked about a little bit, or most screenwriting podcasts talk about, is you just don't want things, you don't want glaring things to distinguish your script. You want to express yourself through the writing and through the story and the characters. You're not going to be able to, as they say, reinvent the wheel through new formatting, Quentin Tarantino style, or having a picture on the front, or, changing out, you don't want interior. You want to say like, something else with the slug line. Like, no. Like, if you're just starting out, just nail the basics, nail like the slug line, nail the description, and do that as good as you can, because people aren't going to think like, oh, this person's being very creative, which you may be, being, creative with it. And that's, in a creative sense, that's fine. But in a sense of you want people to take it seriously, then you just have to nail the established format, like the general established format.
Are there any?
Would you say that's kind of along the lines of what you tell people?
Yeah, I think a lot of I would say so. I mean, I think a lot of new screenwriters, and when you said structure, I thought you were going to go more into like the 3-act structure, the Blake Snyder beat sheet, and I would actually say that is very important. I think if you structure your screenplay well, it almost can't be terrible. Like if you have your 3-act structure, your character arcs, you hit those Blake Snyder beat sheets, it may not be great, but it can't be terrible. Whereas if you don't have good structure, it almost can't be good. There are scripts that don't have good structure that are good. There's some examples, but it's really an uphill battle. You got to be like a really great writer to be able to write a script that doesn't have sort of a conventional structure that's actually good. And so my advice is always just exactly what you're saying is really try and nail the basics before you go out there and try and reinvent the wheel in terms of structure. And I'm talking about more conventional stuff. As I said, like the 3-act structure, really understanding Blake Snyder's beat sheet, the low points, the high points, the catalyst, when those moments should happen, and making sure that they do happen.
No, I totally agree with you on that. But I would even back it up a moment, like you said, like what do you tell first-time screenwriters or whatnot? Like even to get to the point where someone's going to read past a few pages of your script, 5, 10, 20 pages. Like you got to nail just the basics of what a screenplay is. I think I read the transcript of your second podcast where you talk about like when you were starting out, of just nailing those, like understanding what a screenplay is, and really just, understanding the format. Because if you don't understand that, then you are not going to be able to get past anything.
But you're talking about just almost like formatting, just nuts and bolts of that. And so give us a couple tips. How do you recommend somebody nail those things and get that stuff down?
Just read, a few screenplays, just have those in front of you when you're writing the format, when you're typing it out on Final Draft. Use a professional screenwriting program. Because if you're not willing to spend money, on a professional screenwriting program, $200, maximum $200, then really, like, how much are you committed to, even if you consider this a hobby? Like, what hobby are you not willing to spend a couple $100s on, right? I mean, that's just the starting out. Because I deal with a lot of people who are just like, no, I don't need to spend any money. Or you hear like Craig Mazin says, people like that say screenwriting should be free. You don't have to spend any money. It's like, no, you're gonna have to spend some money. Like anything, if you want to get good at it, if you want to look professional, you have to spend money doing it. And one of the things that's going to immediately make you look professional is a professional screenwriting program.
And you're talking basically like Final Draft
or Movie Magic, one of those, either one of those two.
And so those will take care of like 99% of any formatting issues. Just those alone will pretty much fix that. Right,
but also not having huge paragraphs, like huge block paragraphs. Like I still see this like more than 5 lines of description, I would say, more than 5 lines of dialogue at once. Like it's okay occasionally, but if you have it, like if I open up a script and it's just huge, I'm like looking at the screen here, I'm like making signs on the screen, like with my hands so I can see it. Like if you just have like it's just like chunk of description and then chunk of dialogue, then chunk of description, or then it's just like you haven't read a lot of screenplays because that those have to be short. They have to be literally 3 or 4 lines maximum, so people can read these things fast. So you could tell just by glancing at a script, you got to nail that sort of thing too. So I think I told you before the podcast is that one of the things I tell people right now, because I'm not reading a lot of scripts, or not helping out people directly right at this moment, is I just tell them, look, read scripts. Get out there and read get your hands on as many scripts as you can and just read those.
So I guess another good question I would have would be, what are some screenplays that you specifically would recommend people read? I mean, there's some writers out there like Shane Black. You mentioned Quentin Tarantino. These guys have a real style and pizzazz. And one of the things that I've seen is, certainly Shane Black, in the 90s, the late 90s, when I was coming into Hollywood and reading scripts, everybody was copying his style. And the problem is they didn't have his, it felt like a sort of a knockoff, and it felt like they were trying to copy somebody's style as opposed to actually come up with a style of their own, and it felt a little bit stilted, overwritten. So I wonder if there's some writers out there that are maybe good examples for people to read when they're starting out.
Yeah, I would say no. Like, you don't have to read any of these big people. You know, you don't have to read. I would not even think about style, especially if you're just starting out. Like, if you're starting out, I mean, this is another conversation of like how you want to catch people's attention, but you know, just nailing the basics. You know, read like things like, I don't know, like Meet the Parents, right? Which is just a solid, very solid comedy. You know, I think that, you know, that's Ben Stiller. You know, Humbert, I forget the guy's name. But so you have like these just solid writers on these things. So I would just read, you know, screenplays, even screenplays on the blacklist. You know, we're especially screenplays on the blacklist out there that are just unproduced screenplays that are being passed around Hollywood. You know, that are kind of the current style of just how people tell a story or the structure or the format, and just read these and don't try to copy any style. Don't get attached to any like one person or anything like that, but just try to get the sense of what a screenplay is, you know, and what people are reading and how they are, you know, being disseminated like in the Hollywood world, and what people expect when they pick up yours, because they expect one of this type of thing. So just get a sense. It's hard to even nail down to say like copy this person or read this script, but just read. Like if you want to be a screenwriter and you're not reading at least one screenplay a week, you know, then you're really not. You know, you're not. I mean, if you haven't done that in the past, if you've read hundreds of screenplays already, I'm not talking to you. But if you haven't, if you're like, I've read a couple screenplays, you know, and you know, I'll do some screenwriting. Okay, you've read a couple. You need to start reading one a week. You know, at the very minimum, you need to have read hundreds of screenplays, because you know, I could look at a few, you know, I've seen a lot of houses. Like, people say like I've seen movies, you know, I could probably write a screenplay, or look at all those bad movies, I could write something. Yeah, I've seen a lot of houses too, but I don't think I could like design a house, right? Like I'd have to look at blueprints. I'd have to study blueprints, how they do it. Oh, this is a blueprint. Oh, this is how they do it. Oh, okay, I see how they draw the lines. And that's what you need to do. Even if you've seen a ton of movies, even if I've seen, you know, millions of houses, you still need to figure out how they construct these things. So.
Sure. So the takeaway there is read gazillions of screenplays, and
or at least once a week, Ashley.
Yeah,
is that too much to ask?
No, I totally hear you. I just on my blog sellingyourscreenplay.com/library, I have actually posted hundreds of screenplays. I've created my own screenplay library. So anybody listening to this, just go there. It's all free. They're all in PDF format. You can download them. You can read them on your Kindle or your iPad or your iPhone or your computer, whatever.
Right.
So I think that's solid advice. So one of the questions, and I'm sure you get this too, is I get tons of people, new writers especially, and they're always asking, how do I get an agent? How can I find an agent? Do you have any specific tips, since you've been on the inside of an agency, of how do these agents find new writers, and just what are some general tips about getting an agent and finding an agent and getting your script read by an agent?
When people ask me that question, I say, just give your script to my friend Ashley Myers. He'll get you an agent.
Yeah, exactly. If it was only that easy. I wish I could get everybody an agent.
Maybe that's why you're getting all those questions.
Maybe.
No, I mean, you have a great system. You know, I really like your system on your website, you know, Selling Your Screenplay, of the query letter system, because that is, like you say on there, like sometimes it can be a numbers game. And I feel like that is definitely one legitimate and very solid way to go about approaching it. You know, there are other ways. You know, I assume you're asking about other ways, because
sure.
You could talk about the query letter system all day, right? But like other ways, just from working there, like you do get query letters from people, and it's tough because then you do weed through them. You know, I've read far more query letters than I've read screenplays, because that's also what I did for agents and agencies. And so it's tough. That's a tough road to take. More, you know, a better way to get your script read by an agent beyond a query letter. Well, first, let me just say one thing about query letters, is that if you write a solid query letter, or with you or whoever, and you really want it to be read by a certain person, like a certain production company or a certain agency, because they really make your type of movie, like, I would be persistent. And maybe you disagree with this method, but like, I would just call and ask them, hey, have you read my query letter? Because then they will have to read it and respond to you somehow. And they don't get that many people working for agencies. You honestly, for the amount of query letters you get, maybe let's say you get 50 query letters a day at an average agency. For that amount, maybe you get 1 or 2 phone calls about query letters. You know,
Sure.
So that ratio, that's going to set you apart already. If you are a professional and you do act professionally, you don't try to piss them off or anything like that. You're just very polite. Hey,
but to be clear, you're suggesting you mail, email, or fax a query letter, and then a week later, 2 days later, you follow up with a phone call and say, hey, did you see my query letter?
Yeah, follow it up like you're any professional. Like, hey, I really like your company. You guys made such and such and such and such. I hear you're looking for X type of film. Sent you a query letter about a week ago. Wonder if you got a chance to look at it. That's just, and they'll probably say, oh, no, what's your name? But then they realize, wait a second, this person's going to follow up until I actually read their letter or get back to them. So that's one way, I think, if you know a specific, place that you want to go to with something. If you just want to get anybody, then there's definitely your method is an awesome way to go. But the other way, and I think you mentioned this to people too, is that living in LA, you do meet a lot of people who work for the entertainment industry, and so it's about creating a fan base for your own writing. Like for my writing, I'm sure for your writing too, like you could, if you wanted to, you could hand it to people and have them hand it to an agent, or their manager or a friend of a friend or whatnot. Just being here, working in the industry, you start to know people. And if you actively go out and actually actively go out and network, then you know way more people, And so there will always be more people to hand your stuff to. And once you start showing people your writing, and once people actually start liking your writing, which they should if you're good, right? Then they will want to show your script to places because they want to be behind something good. They will be, if you're an assistant and you're just coming up, you want to have a great script in your hand, say like, hey, my friend wrote this, where can it, let's get this made. They want to be that person behind that project. So like the whole myth of like, no one wants to read any screenplays in Hollywood. I feel like that's way overblown. That like people really actually deep down do want to find something good. They really do. They really want to find, like, they wouldn't be doing it if deep down they didn't think there was some diamond in the rough. There's just so much rough that
exactly
so jaded, So they'll put you off. You have to be persistent and you have to push through. So that's what I was saying.
Okay, no, that's excellent advice. So one other thing that I find with new writers, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this, is a lot of new writers feel like if they can get an agent, all of a sudden it's smooth sailing and they're just going to zip right to that A-level screenwriter. And I'd be curious to hear your take on that. Again, working inside the agency, I mean, what percentage of the writers that were represented were actually making a living as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, most of the writers who are making a living at it were on TV, were TV writers, because feature writers, even if you sell a script for, $100,000, $200,000, think of all the people you have to pay, first of all, right? 10% to the agent, 15% to your manager, 5% to your attorney. That's before or after taxes, which is going to take another, 40, 50% on a $100,000 paycheck. So you think, oh, I sold a script for $100,000. Smooth sailing, great stuff. You just immediately lost 30% to your representation, let alone, half the taxes. So what? You come around with $30,000. It's going to set you in LA. You're gonna live for 6 months.
But even more, I'm curious to hear what percentage of the writers had not sold anything in years, and of the how many TV writers did they represent, and what percentage of those TV writers were actually on a show and making a living? Because it's just going to a coffee shop in LA, you run into people that, oh yeah, I'm a writer, and they haven't worked in 10 years, and that's a very common thing. They have representation, good representation, but for whatever reason, and I feel like people put too much faith in, if I could just get an agent, everything will be smooth sailing. And sadly, I wish it was that simple, but sadly, that's not always the case.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the biggest misconceptions about being a screenwriter about Hollywood, is that, especially at the lower or mid-level, even upper mid-level areas, is that once you get an agent, you're set. Once you get a manager, you're set. No, that's just the beginning. The people who I know who have been successful, even when they get an agent, even when they get a manager, that they just know that's a stepping stone, and they're still out there writing like crazy, pushing their work, writing and pushing, and like they know the agent or manager isn't going to do anything for them. They're going to help with the deal and whatnot, but ultimately it's up to the person who's writing, who's going to be able to create something, who's going to be able to go out there and also help them network. So in my experience, it's by far not the end of the road. It's just the beginning of the road. You get an agent or manager, I would say, here's what it indicates. It indicates that you are on the right path. It should be a sign. It should be like, okay, this is a sign that actually I am a solid screenwriter and that I am good at this. I am better than, 98% of the other people out there. However, you still have thousands of people to compete against. So it's just a sign, and you should say, great, got that sign. Now it's time to keep pushing. So,
So, okay, well, I just want to maybe give you a chance to. Are you still doing script consulting? And if people want to contact you, what's a good way to do that?
People can always contact me at eric@scriptdreric.com. Go to my website, which is obviously scriptdreric.com. Right now, though, I'm working on something else right now, something secretive. But I did kind of, I don't know if I told you this, but I sort of temporarily have passed the reins of scriptdreric.com over to Joey, our good friend, Script Dr. Joey. You know Joey from the Writers Group.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
she's like one of the best. She's one of the best screenwriters I know, to be honest. And one of the best note givers I know. So I had like no problem recommending her to people. She's been a reader. So if you go to scriptdreric.com, Joey can give you notes. So Script Dr. Joey will completely help you out. If you're looking for feedback on your script, it's about $100 for a feature, $75 if you're doing TV. She's really good with TV, $60 for a pilot. So go to scriptdreric.com and check it out. Hopefully I'll be returning there soon. I'm always on Twitter too and Facebook, and so hopefully I'll be returning and updating the website more frequently. So, but I appreciate you having me on. This has been, and thanks for coming on Scriptcast back in the day.
Yeah, sure. No, it was fun. Yeah, no, we've had a good relationship. It all started too just with a cold email you sent me, and slowly over the years we've gotten to know each other better. So no, I appreciate your coming on too today, Eric. So thank you very much. I will link to everything that you just mentioned. I'll link to your blog and your Twitter account, your Facebook page in the show notes so people can find you there. So thank you, Eric.
There are a couple key takeaways from the interview that I just want to emphasize. He mentions his writing partner meeting a producer at a party. If you listen to this podcast or read my blog, you know I'm a big proponent to moving to Los Angeles, and this is a clear example of why it's important. It's highly unlikely that you're going to run into a low-budget producer at a party anywhere in the world except LA. Also, finding a good writing partner is going to be much more difficult outside of LA. In LA, there are so many writers that your pool of potential writing partners is much greater. Also, when he said he read over 1,000 screenplays, I think that's something to really consider. That's a lot of reading, but that's the sort of effort it takes to be a professional. Like Eric, I'm a big proponent of spending a few bucks and buying Final Draft. It really will take care of 99% of your formatting issues. I get a ton of questions about formatting, screenplay formatting issues, and really Final Draft will take care of 99% of those. I also think it's interesting that Eric didn't want to rattle off a bunch of specific screenplays that he thought you should read. It's a point well taken. You should really be reading so many screenplays that there isn't any point to naming a few specific ones. To name a few specific screenplays would be to really cheapen the whole thing, because you should be reading tons. I think he said once per week, and I think that's a really ideal amount. Just if you want to be a screenwriter, go out and get some screenplays and start reading them. He also mentioned the Blacklist. I'm sure many of you have heard of that, but it's an annual list of supposedly the best unproduced screenplays in Hollywood, and it's voted on by industry professionals. It's become very prestigious to have your screenplay listed on the Blacklist. If you want to learn more about that, I will link to their official website in the show notes. You can usually find the screenplays that are on this Blacklist. You can usually find those screenplays by doing a couple of Google searches. So if you want to read some of them, just search for the title of the screenplay, and oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes you can find the actual screenplay and read it. And they are great examples of screenplays to read, because it's basically insiders, and a lot of them don't end up getting produced. A lot of them do get produced, but a lot of them don't. And it's interesting to read screenplays and that are highly regarded in the industry and kind of get a feel for what those are and why they're good. Also, I mentioned in the interview that I've launched my own screenplay library. You can find that at sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. I have hundreds of screenplays in PDF format. It's all free. You just go there, click around. I have everything alphabetized, and you can just download PDF scripts and read them at your leisure. So that's a good resource if you're wondering where to find screenplays. I just want to take a quick moment to talk about some of the other services I offer at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Each month I run an online class. Last month was the first class, and it was about choosing a marketable concept. I recorded the class and have posted it inside the screenwriting forum that I run. I feel like this is the single biggest mistake that new screenwriters make. They'll write an entire screenplay based on a concept that isn't marketable. So if you feel like you need some help in figuring out how to create marketable concepts, check out that class. Go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com to learn more about this. This month, I'm going to be running an online class about everything you need to do before you start actually writing. Most new screenwriters start writing their screenplay way too soon. Screenplays are all about planning and structure. If you lay the proper groundwork before you begin writing your screenplay, you're likely to have a much easier time writing your screenplay, and you're likely to end up with a much better screenplay. If you'd like to learn more about this class, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. So just want to talk about what's going to be in next month's episode. I'm going to be answering one of the most common questions that I get. It goes something like this. If you were starting out today and had no contacts in the industry, what would you do to jumpstart your career? So in next month's episode, I'm going to give you a quick step-by-step guide to getting your first few credits as a screenwriter. In this day and age, it's never been easier than it is right now to get a credit because production costs have fallen so much. So keep an eye out for that next month. In this episode's Writing Words section, I just want to share a little story that will hopefully inspire you and help you with your own writing. After I started this blog a few years ago, I went to Blog World Expo in Las Vegas, and it's just a blogging convention, just all about blogging, and there's a bunch of sessions and classes and stuff that will hopefully help you with your running your own blog. One of the sessions that I went to was called something like An Hour with Big Money Bloggers, and the people on the panel were all people earning tens of thousands of dollars per month from their blogs. The three guys on the panel were a guy named Jeremy Shoemoney Shoemaker, John Chow, and another guy named Brian Clark, who runs Copyblogger. In the blogging world, these guys are real celebrities, and there was a packed house. I mean, there had to have been 200-300 people at this session. The session was basically people in the audience asking questions, and then the panel would answer the questions. There was a ton of really detailed technical questions, stuff like what plugins you should use for your blogging, for your blog, tricks to increase your Twitter following. It became pretty clear that the people in the audience were looking for some sort of magic bullet. They wanted to make a lot of money from their blogs, and they were hoping that these guys could give them some sort of secret sauce that just would allow them to make tons of money. Finally, I think it was John Chow. He said that he had blogged for 2 or 3 years before he started earning any money from his blog. And he knew how many posts he had written over the course of that 2 or 3 years. It was something like 2.6 per day for 3 years. So it was like 1,000 posts before he had actually made any money. And then he asked people in the audience if anyone had been consistently blogging for that many years and had that many posts and wasn't making any money from their blog. There was literally nobody raised their hand. And this was a kind of a real revelation to me. All of a sudden it dawned on me that the secret to success is that there is no secret. I kind of feel like these bloggers sometimes running my screenwriting blog. I get a ton of questions from people, and I often feel like a lot of the questions really don't matter, and people should really just worry about the big picture. So I guess what are the big things that I think people should concentrate on? First, I think people should look at this screenwriting journey as a sort of a 5-year plan. Don't get too caught up in the moment and just realize it's going to take many years. Let's just say 5 years for the sake of this for the sake of this argument. So the main things you should concentrate are just exactly what Script Dr. Eric just said in the interview, reading a lot of scripts. That's a huge component to being a good screenwriter, is just sitting down and reading scripts. The other obviously big component to being a good screenwriter is writing. I think if you're working a full-time job and have a family, hopefully you can find at minimum 1 hour per day, 4 days per week. So that's basically 4 hours per week. And it doesn't have to be, precisely 4 hours every week. But I think the consistency really will help you improve. Just trying to find some specific time that you're free and you can spend an hour really getting down to business and writing. Hopefully you're thinking about your script all day, so when you actually do sit down to write, it's actually really productive time. You've already thought through some of the scenes, you've already thought through some of the choices that you're going to make. So after 5 years of that, you should probably have 5 to 8 completed screenplays of just consistently writing 4 hours a week. The other component, so you got reading a lot of scripts, writing a lot of scripts. The next component obviously is the marketing. And I do want to just be careful about the sort of the example I just gave about blogging. Blogging by design is marketing. Just by blogging, you are actually doing some marketing, whether you know it or not, because the search engines find your blog, they index it, and they bring you traffic. I mean, that's marketing. With screenwriting, the marketing is not built into the act of writing. So you've got to go out and actively market your screenplays. And that's really what my blog is all about. So I'm not going to go into like the specific tactics of what you should be doing. I go into that a lot on my blog, and certainly we'll spend a lot of time on this podcast. But suffice it to say that after a year or two of consistently writing for 4 hours a week, you should have maybe 3 or 4 completed screenplays that you think are halfway decent. And at that point, I think it's time to start really dividing your time and spend half your time writing and half your time marketing. So that's really it. That's, to me, really exactly what John Chow basically said. It's like, just sit down and do the work and write. Read a lot of screenplays, write a lot of screenplays, and market the screenplays you have. Just concentrate on those big things and don't get caught up in anything else. Any of these little formatting issues, questions about query letters, all those things, they will literally answer themselves after you've gotten out there and just done it. Send out query letters, see what the response is, talk to producers, read scripts. All of a sudden, all these questions that you have and you feel sort of insecure, you don't know if you're doing it right, you don't know what's going to happen, all those questions will start to evaporate if you just get out and do it. Don't worry about these little minutia, the minutia of sort of what you need to do. Just start doing it. You're going to make some mistakes. That's part of the process. You're going to make some horrendous mistakes. When I started out, I was sending out stuff that should definitely not have been sent out. So the key here is, and what I kind of want the takeaway from this to be, is that I don't have any sort of secret knowledge that I can share with you that's going to all of a sudden make you a successful screenwriter. It's just really about getting out there and doing it for yourself. I mean, there's no screenwriter, there's no screenwriting book, there's no screenwriting podcast that has the secret answer. And I hope that you're not listening to this podcast during the time that you could and should be actually writing. I mean, podcasts are great and screenwriting books are great. I definitely think they should be sort of a part of your overall strategy, but that's like the icing. It's not the cake. This podcast is not the cake. It's just the icing. The cake is the reading screenplays, the writing screenplays, and the marketing of the screenplays. I mean, I listen to a ton of podcasts, but I listen to them when I go for a walk or when I'm in my car driving, and I really couldn't be doing anything more productive. I want to offer a challenge here to the readers. I'd like to hear from anyone who's done all the things that I just mentioned, reading screenplays, writing screenplays, and marketing screenplays, and has done it for 5 years and has not had any success. Just send me an email and tell me what you've done and tell me you haven't had any success. My guess is I won't have any emails of someone saying this. But if you do, if you're that person that's done all 3 of these things and you've done it consistently for 5 years and still haven't had any success, by all means, send me an email. I'd certainly like to talk to you. And what I'm trying to sort of lay out here is that it's really that simple. There's no shortcut. There's no secret sauce. There's no secret thing that you're missing. It's really just about putting your head down and doing the work. I want to be clear about one thing. I have met many people over the years that have written scripts for more than 5 years. They've written dozens of scripts and they have not found success. But what generally when I get to talking to them, what the issue is they have not spent the time marketing their scripts. All they've done is just sat down and write scripts. And this is not do 2 out of 3 things and you'll have success. You've got to do all 3 of these things. That's all you have to do, but you've got to do all 3 of them. It's not about just doing 2 of them and hoping that the 3rd one takes care of itself. So once again, if you are that person that has done these things, just send me an email and I would really like to talk to you. I'd be happy to try and help you because I really think if you're consistently doing these things for 5 years, you will find some success. So if you haven't done all these things for 5 years, just make that your mission, day by day, week by week, and month by month. Just keep plodding along. Your efforts will slowly add up. Don't let trivial questions get you off track. Just put them out of your mind. When I started out, I didn't know what I was doing or how to write a screenplay or how to write a query letter. But you know what? I just sent out terrible query letters and I sent out terrible screenplays. But I got better and I learned, and that's the key. Don't worry about making mistakes. We all make mistakes. I still make plenty of mistakes, some of them pretty huge. As I mentioned earlier in this podcast, after more than a decade of writing screenplays, I wrote a baseball comedy, and now I can see that it's going to be very difficult to get it produced no matter how good the script is. But I learned from it, and now I spend a lot more time really considering the concept of the spec scripts that I'm going to write. Don't look for shortcuts and magic bullets. The magic is in the slow, unglamorous process of reading and writing and marketing a little bit every day. So thank you for listening to the podcast. Hopefully you'll listen again. Thank you and goodbye.